They tried to destroy my career. Little did they know, I planted a deadly trap for them. The digital clock on the conference room wall glowed, an unfeeling arbiter of time, its red digits now frozen at 0. Around him, the air crackled with a triumphant energy that was distinctly not his own. Lyra, her smile a beacon of carefully constructed satisfaction, stood beside the massive display, her arms sweeping dramatically towards the frozen, error-laden interface of what was supposed to be Kalen's life's work. Her voice, a practiced blend of concern and regret, began to fill the hushed space. "As you can see, ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her tone modulated perfectly to convey a hint of disappointment. "It appears Kalen's system, despite its ambitious scope, has encountered some significant and unforeseen challenges." Selim, lurking slightly behind her, offered a smirk, a silent echo of her words. He caught Kalen's eye, a glint of malicious glee dancing within his own, a look that seemed to scream, "Game over." A murmur, low and resonant, rippled through the room. The faces of the executives, moments ago alight with anticipation for the unveiling of Nexus AI, now wore expressions ranging from dismay to outright anger. Kalen's project, his magnum opus, lay shattered on the screen, a monument to failure. Yet, he felt no panic, no despair, only a profound sense of quiet satisfaction. Their trap, meticulously laid, had sprung exactly as he had foreseen, and in springing, it had inadvertently triggered his own. He watched their performance, a masterclass in corporate deceit. Lyra's perfectly rehearsed lines about unforeseen complexities and the inherent risks of groundbreaking innovation were designed with surgical precision to shift blame, to paint him as incompetent, visionary, but ultimately flawed. Her hands moved with an almost balletic grace, her eyes, despite the feigned concern, darting subtly, gauging the audience's reaction. Selim's occasional interjections, feigning technical understanding, were just enough to lend credibility to her narrative. He spoke of resource contention and unmanaged pointers with a theatrical sigh, as if deeply pained by the apparent oversight. They were good, Kalen would grant them that, but they were predictable, and predictability, in his line of work, was a vulnerability. He simply nodded, his expression neutral, his gaze steady, acknowledging the murmurs of the room as if they were merely background noise. They mistook his calm for resignation, his silence for defeat. They couldn't have been more wrong. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly fathom, was that this meticulously orchestrated disaster wasn't the end of his career, it was the beginning of theirs. And not in the way they intended. Kalen's mind, even in that moment of apparent professional ruin, remained clear, analytical. He observed the slight tremor in Lyra's hand as she gestured, a subtle tell that betrayed her underlying tension, despite her poised exterior. He noted the way Selim's eyes darted furtively towards him, seeking confirmation of his broken spirit, hungry for a sign of his defeat. These were the tells, the tiny, almost imperceptible cracks in their meticulously crafted facade. He had been observing them for months, gathering these fragments of information, patiently piecing together the true nature of their ambition. They saw a quiet, unassuming software architect. They saw a target. What they failed to see was the fortress he had built, brick by digital brick, around his creation and, more importantly, around himself. The countdown timer on the wall, now frozen at 0, wasn't just counting down to the public demonstration. It was counting down to their reckoning. And he, Kalen, the underestimated, was about to pull the trigger. The journey to that moment of calculated stillness, amidst the storm of manufactured failure, had been a long one, paved with countless sleepless nights and a deep-seated, almost primal distrust of the corporate landscape he inhabited. He was Kalen, a lead software architect, and his unassuming nature was, for many, an invitation to underestimate. His colleagues, often caught in the ceaseless churn of office politics, found his quiet demeanor and intense focus on his work perplexing, sometimes even irritating. He'd always preferred the quiet hum of servers to the boisterous clamor of office politics, the elegant logic of code to the convoluted machinations of human ambition. His life revolved around lines of syntax, algorithms, and the intricate dance of data. Nexus AI, his brainchild, was a testament to that devotion. Years of his life poured into its creation, a groundbreaking system poised to redefine their industry. It was more than just code. It was a reflection of his belief in the power of intelligent design, a system built not just for efficiency, but for integrity, for an inherent resistance to corruption and manipulation. He envisioned it as a tool that would empower, not control, a system whose very foundation was built on transparent, verifiable processes. His history with Lyra and Selim was a slow, simmering brew of passive-aggressive skirmishes and thinly veiled slights, a narrative woven into the fabric of daily office life. Lyra, the senior project manager, was a creature of pure ambition, a shark in a tailored suit, always circling, always seeking advantage. Her smile, though wide and seemingly inviting, never quite reached her eyes, which were constantly calculating angles, opportunities, and risks. She saw people not as colleagues to collaborate with, but as resources to be leveraged or obstacles to be removed. Kalen had seen her subtly undermine others, subtly shift blame, take credit for work she barely touched, and spin failures into opportunities for her own advancement. There was the time she had orchestrated a minor departmental reshuffle, ostensibly for efficiency, but effectively sidelining a talented but less assertive developer whose rising star threatened her own. Kalen had observed, quietly, making mental notes. Selim, on the other hand, was a different breed of venom. A senior developer, he possessed a certain technical competence, a knack for intricate coding puzzles, but lacked the vision or the patience for true innovation. His jealousy of Kalen's rapid ascent, the undeniable brilliance of Nexus AI, and the attention it garnered was palpable, a bitter scent in the air whenever Kalen presented. He'd often offer to review Kalen's code, a seemingly helpful gesture, only to insert minor, almost unnoticeable inefficiencies, a slightly less optimal algorithm here, an unnecessary database query there, hoping they'd cascade into larger, more visible issues during stress tests. Kalen, with his meticulous eye and deep understanding of his own code, always caught them, quietly correcting them without confrontation, without a word, but their frequency had become a pattern, a quiet warning that hummed beneath the surface of his awareness. He often found these subtle sabotages late at night, long after Selim had left, the digital timestamps a silent testament to betrayal. He would quietly refactor the code, sometimes adding a few extra lines of robust error handling just to spite the malicious intent. There was a particular incident, about 8 months prior, that solidified Kalen's resolve and shifted his perspective from mere vigilance to strategic counteraction. A critical module for a smaller, internal project he was leading had suddenly developed inexplicable bugs just before a key presentation to the board. The module, a complex data visualization tool, had begun to render charts inaccurately, displaying corrupted datasets and freezing intermittently. Hours of frantic debugging, fueled by adrenaline and black coffee, led him down a rabbit hole of code. He finally discovered a series of cleverly disguised, non-critical errors injected directly into the core framework. They weren't designed to crash the system outright. That would be too obvious. Instead, they were engineered to subtly degrade performance, to make it appear sluggish, unreliable, to erode confidence in Kalen's leadership and technical prowess. The timing was too perfect, the nature of the flaws too specific, too insidious. It reeked of sabotage. While he couldn't definitively prove who was responsible at the time, the pattern of access logs, the timestamps, and the specific lines of altered code pointed strongly towards Selim's login credentials. Furthermore, Lyra had been suspiciously quick to offer solutions that involved sidelining Kalen's team and assigning the module to a more experienced third-party vendor, a vendor, Kalen later discovered, with whom Lyra had a suspiciously close working relationship. He managed to neutralize the flaws just in time, pulling an all-nighter that stretched into the presentation itself, but the experience left an indelible mark. It was a stark reminder that in this environment, his integrity, his career, was not just dependent on his own skill, but on his ability to defend against the unseen enemy, against those who wore smiles while wielding digital daggers. That incident was the genesis of his deadly trap. He realized then that traditional security measures, firewalls and access controls, were insufficient. They protected against external threats, against anonymous hackers and digital marauders. But what about the enemy within? The insidious, targeted attack from someone with legitimate access, someone who knew the system's architecture, someone who could blend malicious code seamlessly with legitimate functions? His solution wasn't a simple firewall. It was an advanced, self-diagnosing forensic module woven into the very fabric of Nexus AI. He spent months working in a clandestine corner of the system, often late into the night after everyone else had left, crafting this digital sentinel. He isolated a specific, secure partition of the main server, making it invisible to standard network scans and even most administrative tools. He wrote the code in a unique, highly obfuscated language, making it virtually unreadable and untraceable by anyone but himself. This module, which he affectionately nicknamed Cerberus, the multi-headed guardian of the underworld, was not merely a passive logger. It incorporated sophisticated heuristics and behavioral analysis, far beyond typical anomaly detection. If it detected an injection of foreign code or an unauthorized modification of critical system parameters, Cerberus wouldn't just flag it. It would perform a forensic snapshot, creating a complete, immutable copy of the system state at the moment of intrusion. It would then intelligently isolate the malicious payload, neutralize its immediate effect without crashing the system, essentially rerouting the rogue instructions into a digital void, allowing Nexus AI to continue functioning as if nothing had happened. And then, most critically, it would meticulously log every detail, the exact timestamp of the intrusion down to the millisecond, the internal network IP address from which the modification originated, the authenticated user ID associated with that IP, the specific lines of code altered, the method of injection, e.g., direct commit, script execution, remote access, and even the preceding and succeeding system calls around the point of compromise. It was designed to create an ironclad digital trail, a chain of evidence that pointed directly and irrefutably to the perpetrator. He built in redundancies, fail-safes, and an encrypted, off-site data replication system for these logs, ensuring that even if the primary system was completely wiped, the evidence would remain, pristine and untouched, on a secure cloud server under his sole, encrypted control. Cerberus was a ghost in the machine, lying dormant, waiting, its digital senses constantly alert, silently observing, learning, and recording. Kalen didn't tell anyone about Cerberus. Not a soul. It was his secret weapon, born of necessity and a grim understanding of human nature. He continued his work on Nexus AI with the same quiet dedication, letting Lyra and Selim believe they had him figured out. Let them see his quiet demeanor as weakness, his focused intensity as a lack of awareness of the corporate game. The more they underestimated him, the more effective his trap would be. His peace of mind wasn't in preventing the attack, but in knowing that when it came, it would be met with an unyielding counter-strategy. He just needed to wait for the grand unveiling, for the perfect moment for Cerberus to unleash its truth, not just to protect his work, but to expose the treachery that festered within the company's walls. The weeks leading up to the public demonstration of Nexus AI were a masterclass in silent warfare, a carefully choreographed dance of feigned obliviousness and calculated detection. Lyra and Selim, increasingly confident in their perceived success in undermining him, began their subtle assaults with greater frequency and boldness. Kalen observed them, a detached scientist studying a predictable experiment, noting their patterns, their increasing arrogance. Selim would often offer to help with final code reviews, a seemingly innocent gesture of collaboration. Kalen would let him access the repositories, feigning a slight reluctance, a gentle sigh about the workload, only to notice, within hours, the telltale signs. Small, almost imperceptible changes. A critical loop optimized slightly less efficiently, adding perhaps a few microseconds to processing time under load. A variable naming convention subtly altered to create a minor parsing delay in the diagnostic logs, obscuring errors. Or, more egregiously, the insertion of a single, seemingly innocuous line of code within a critical subroutine that, under specific load conditions, would trigger a resource leak, slowly consuming system memory until it inevitably crashed. Each time, Cerberus would spring into action, its internal alarms silent to the outside world, but its logging functions whirring, not just neutralizing the immediate threat by rerouting the malicious code, but recording the precise details of the intrusion, an immutable digital ledger. Kalen would then, with a casualness that must have infuriated Selim, discover and fix these minor oversights. He'd approach Selim in the break room, a calm expression on his face. Selim, just noticed a small optimization opportunity in the data handler. Nothing major, but I've pushed a quick fix. Selim would watch him, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes, but Kalen's calm explanation, just a typo, easily missed, happens to the best of us, or a slight optimization I just thought of, decided to implement it right away, seemed to placate him. Selim interpreted Kalen's quick fixes as a sign of his brilliant but disorganized mind tidying up last-minute details, or perhaps, Kalen suspected, as Kalen being a workaholic who simply couldn't resist tweaking code. He saw Kalen's silence as an indication that he was too deep in the code, too disconnected from the corporate machinations, to notice his true machinations. Lyra, on her part, became increasingly adept at creating administrative roadblocks. She'd delay access to certain critical test environments with vague excuses about budget constraints or resource allocation issues, misplace critical documentation needed for final system validation, or schedule conflicting meetings that pulled Kalen's attention away from crucial preparations. Kalen navigated these obstacles with quiet efficiency, never showing frustration, always finding an alternative path, often working longer hours, but never revealing the true depth of his understanding. Their arrogance, fueled by Kalen's apparent passivity, grew exponentially. They believed they were brilliant, invisible, their machinations undetectable. Kalen heard whispers, subtle shifts in tone from colleagues who seemed to be echoing Lyra's narratives. Lyra was subtly positioning herself to be the savior if Nexus AI faltered, dropping hints about her contingency plans and risk mitigation strategies. Selim, in hushed conversations in the cafeteria, would lament Kalen's over-engineering or lack of practical sense, subtly laying the groundwork for the narrative of Kalen's inevitable failure. He even heard Selim remark once, with a dismissive wave of his hand, "Kalen is brilliant, but he lives in the clouds. Nexus needs someone grounded." Kalen let them. Every whisper, every slight, every malicious line of code injected into his system was another data point, another piece of evidence for Cerberus to log. His plan wasn't to prevent their attempts. It was to allow them to incriminate themselves fully, to weave a web of deceit so intricate that when it unraveled, it would take them down with it, irrevocably. There was a particular instance, just 2 days before the demo, where Selim, emboldened by what he perceived as Kalen's utter obliviousness, inserted a more complex and devastating piece of malicious code. It was designed to trigger a cascading series of errors, leading to a complete system freeze, but only when Nexus AI was subjected to a specific, high-load external query that would be a key part of the public demonstration. He was so careful, embedding it deep within a rarely accessed diagnostic module, a module that would only be called under extreme stress conditions, far from the main execution path. Kalen watched Cerberus flag it in real time, its internal alarms silent to him, but its logging functions whirring, meticulously recording every detail, creating a pristine forensic snapshot. He felt a quiet thrill, a surge of adrenaline that was quickly replaced by calm. They were walking straight into the snare. He made no immediate correction. He wanted the system to appear to fail, just as they intended, for their confidence to swell to its breaking point. Kalen's calm was not the calm of ignorance, but the calm of absolute certainty, the quiet assurance of a master strategist whose plan was unfolding perfectly. The stage was set. The trap was primed. The day of the Nexus AI unveiling arrived, a symphony of polished chrome, hushed anticipation, and the faint scent of fear that mingled with the expensive conference room air freshener. The main conference room, usually reserved for quarterly financial reports and drab budget discussions, was transformed and packed to capacity. Executives from every department, major investors flown in from across the globe, key partners from allied corporations, all were there, a formidable audience whose collective gaze felt like a tangible weight. Kalen stood at the podium, feeling the weight of their expectations, and, more acutely, the predatory gaze of Lyra and Selim in the front row, their smiles thin, expectant. His presentation began smoothly, Nexus AI performing flawlessly through its initial demonstrations. The audience watched, captivated, as the system processed complex financial data, generated insightful market analytics, and even engaged in nuanced conversational exchanges with a simulated client. A quiet hum of approval, a collective sigh of relief, began to fill the room. This was his moment, the culmination of years, the validation of his vision. Then, at precisely the moment Kalen initiated the high-load external query, the one Selim had targeted, the one designed to bring Nexus AI to its knees, the system froze. The elegant, intuitive interface on the main screen abruptly pixelated, then dissolved into a cascade of red error messages and cryptic code, a digital scream of failure. A collective gasp, sharp and audible, swept through the room, followed by an immediate hush. Kalen's heart, against his will, gave a single, almost imperceptible lurch, a phantom echo of panic that quickly settled. This was it, the moment he had prepared for. The trap had sprung. Lyra, ever the opportunist, ever the performer, sprang into action with practiced speed. She rushed to the stage, her face a mask of practiced concern, a worried frown etched between her perfectly sculpted brows. "Oh dear," she sighed, her voice perfectly modulated to convey disappointment mixed with sympathy, placing a reassuring hand on Kalen's shoulder, a gesture that felt less like comfort and more like a spider's caress. "It seems we've hit a snag. These complex systems can be so temperamental, especially under pressure." Selim, just behind her, chimed in, his voice laced with a subtle, smug satisfaction. "It's exactly what he warned about, Kalen. Too many dependencies, too much complexity. It's an architectural flaw, pure and simple, inherent in his design choices." He began to type rapidly on a nearby console, feigning a frantic attempt to diagnose the issue, his fingers a blur over the keyboard, while Lyra turned to the audience, her posture radiating confident authority. "We have a team on standby, of course," she announced, her voice dripping with the promise of rescue, of her impending heroism. "We'll have it stabilized in no time." These things happen with groundbreaking technology. They were poised to step in, to fix the issues, to claim the credit for salvaging the disaster. Their victory was palpable, a bitter taste in the air, a sense of triumph radiating from them. Kalen remained utterly calm. He looked at the frozen screen, then back at Lyra and Selim, their faces alight with a barely suppressed triumph, their eyes gleaming with anticipated success. He saw their future, laid out before them, his downfall, their ascent, the corporate ladder conquered. A quiet, Almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, a secret known only to him. Actually, he said, his voice cutting through Lyra's monologue, calm but firm, projecting effortlessly through the stunned silence that had fallen over the audience. There's no need for that. Lyra paused, her hand still on Kalen's shoulder, her smile faltering slightly, a tiny crack appearing in her carefully constructed facade. Kalen, please, let us handle this. It's clearly a critical failure. The system has crashed. A critical failure. Yes, Kalen agreed, his gaze unwavering as he met hers, his calm intensity unsettling her. But not in the way you perceive it. He moved deliberately, taking control of the main console, his movements precise and purposeful. His fingers danced across the keyboard, typing a command that was known only to him, a sequence of characters he had memorized and rehearsed countless times in his mind. The red error messages on the main screen vanished, replaced not by the Nexus AI interface, but by a new, stark display. Lines of code, precise timestamps, and unambiguous user IDs began to scroll rapidly, filling the massive screen. The room hushed, a collective ripple of confusion spreading through the audience, their gazes fixed on the evolving display. This, Kalen announced, his voice clear and projecting, carrying to every corner of the room, is Cerberus, the self-diagnosing forensic module I built into Nexus AI months ago, specifically to identify and neutralize malicious intrusions and, more importantly, to meticulously log the identity of the perpetrators. Lyra's eyes widened, her pupils dilating, a flicker of pure terror replacing her practiced composure. Her hand dropped from Kalen's shoulder as if burned. Selim's fingers froze mid-air above his keyboard, his feigned diagnostic attempts forgotten. The scrolling data continued, each line a damning piece of evidence, unfolding the truth with relentless precision. On your screen now, Kalen continued, gesturing to the main display, his voice unwavering. You'll see the precise timestamp of a code injection that occurred 2 days ago, targeting the high-load query handler. You'll see the specific lines of malicious code inserted, lines designed to trigger a cascading resource leak and system freeze under the exact conditions we just demonstrated. He paused, letting the information sink in, allowing the gravity of the revelation to permeate the stunned audience. And you will also see, he said, his voice dropping to a low, chilling clarity, the internal network IP address and the authenticated user ID responsible for that injection. The screen highlighted a specific line in stark red. User_ID, Selim.m. Senior Dev. A gasp, louder this time. A collective exhalation of shock and disbelief erupted from the audience. Selim's face drained of all color, his jaw slacked, his eyes wide and unseeing. He looked like a deer caught in headlights, utterly exposed. Furthermore, Kalen pressed on, his voice gaining a quiet, undeniable momentum, his gaze sweeping over the horrified faces of Lyra and Selim. Cerberus has also logged numerous other unauthorized modifications and attempts to inject faulty logic into Nexus AI over the past few weeks. Each one, meticulously recorded, with full timestamps and the corresponding user IDs. He executed another command. A second, even longer list began to scroll, detailing countless minor alterations, subtle inefficiencies introduced into core algorithms, and attempts to compromise data integrity. Each entry was tied to either Selim.m or, more subtly, through shared team access credentials that Lyra had manipulated, to Lyra.j. Senior PM. The details were excruciating, undeniable. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the soft whirring of the projectors and the rapid, panicked breathing of Lyra and Selim. Lyra tried to speak, her mouth opening and closing, but only a strangled sound emerged, a pathetic gurgle of disbelief and fear. Her carefully constructed world, built on deceit and manipulation, was crumbling around her. This module, Kalen concluded, gesturing to the screen, his voice resonating with quiet authority, was designed to protect Nexus AI from precisely this kind of internal sabotage. It neutralized the malicious code without alerting the perpetrator, allowing them to believe their plan was succeeding, while meticulously building an irrefutable digital trail of their actions. He looked directly at Lyra, then at Selim, his gaze unwavering, a silent testament to his foresight. Your plan, it seems, was not as groundbreaking as you believed. The aftermath was swift, brutal, and entirely deserved. The initial shock in the room gave way to a cold, righteous anger. The executives, their faces grim and set, didn't need further explanation. The evidence, displayed so starkly and irrefutably on the screen, spoke for itself, a digital indictment that left no room for doubt. Lyra, her carefully constructed facade utterly shattered, began to stammer, incoherent denials spilling from her lips. This is a fabrication. A hack. He's lying. But her words were hollow, lacking any conviction, her voice thin and reedy. Her face was contorted not with indignation, but with raw, unadulterated fear, a stark contrast to her earlier composed arrogance. Selim, a man usually brimming with snide remarks and technical bluster, was a ghost. He stood frozen, his eyes wide and vacant, as if he couldn't comprehend the depth of the pit he had dug for himself. His technical mind, once so proud of its ability to craft undetectable flaws, was now confronted with a system that had not only detected them, but had also turned them into the very instruments of his downfall. He didn't deny anything. He simply stared, utterly defeated, his spirit broken. Within minutes, security personnel, who had been discreetly waiting outside, were called in. Lyra and Selim were escorted from the room, their protests quickly silenced, their humiliation complete. The hushed whispers that followed their departure were not of sympathy, but of disbelief and quiet condemnation. Kalen watched them go, a sense of profound calm settling over him. There was no joy in their humiliation, only the quiet satisfaction of justice served, of a long-simmering threat finally neutralized. Other colleagues, who had perhaps tolerated or even admired Lyra's ruthless efficiency and Selim's technical prowess, now looked at them with disgust, their perceptions irrevocably altered. Some turned to Kalen, their expressions a mixture of shock and newfound respect, a silent acknowledgement of his quiet strength. The unassuming Kalen had just exposed a deep vein of corporate treachery, and he had done it with the quiet precision of a surgeon. The Nexus AI demonstration, paused only briefly, resumed. This time, however, it performed flawlessly, its true capabilities shining through, unhindered by insidious code. The initial apprehension in the room was replaced by a renewed sense of wonder and, for some, a deep shame that they had been so easily swayed by the saboteur's narrative. Over the next few days, an internal investigation confirmed every detail Cerberus had logged. The ironclad digital trail, backed by system logs and physical access records, led directly to Lyra and Selim. They were immediately terminated, and given the severity of their actions, which constituted not just sabotage, but also a significant breach of company intellectual property and corporate ethics, legal action was swiftly initiated. Their careers, once on a rapid ascent, were irrevocably destroyed, their reputations in the industry in tatters. Life after the unveiling settled into a new rhythm for Kalen. The air in the department felt lighter, cleansed of the insidious undercurrent of distrust and ambition. There was a newfound respect for his work, not just for Nexus AI's brilliance, but for the foresight, integrity, and quiet resilience he had demonstrated. His quiet demeanor was no longer interpreted as weakness, but as a sign of measured strength and deep strategic thinking, of a mind always 3 steps ahead. He was no longer merely the brilliant software architect. He was the one who had safeguarded the company's future, the one who saw beyond the surface, the silent guardian. Nexus AI, liberated from the constant threat of internal sabotage, flourished, quickly becoming the cornerstone of the company's new strategic initiatives, its integrity unquestioned. His role evolved, taking on more trust-based responsibilities, advising on security architecture and corporate integrity, helping to build a more ethical and transparent working environment. Kalin found a quiet peace in the hum of the servers, in the elegant dance of the code that now served its true purpose. The experience had reinforced a fundamental truth within him. That true strength lies not in outward displays of power or in the ruthless pursuit of ambition, but in the quiet cultivation of integrity, foresight, and a resilient self-reliance. It taught him that while the world may underestimate one for a quiet nature, it is precisely in that stillness that one can cultivate the sharpest mind and the most effective strategies. For anyone who has ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or targeted by the machinations of others, remember this. The greatest battles are often won not with noise and fury, but with patience, preparation, and the quiet, unwavering conviction that truth, when revealed with precision, is the most powerful weapon of all. Build your own Cerberus, whatever form it may take, for the quiet mind that anticipates treachery is always more formidable than the loud one that orchestrates it. If stories like this resonate with you, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on more immersive narratives. What was your favorite moment in Kalin's story? Have you ever had to deal with a Lyra or a Selim in your own life? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.